Let me find a good balance here. Does that work? Everybody hear me okay?
Yeah!
All right, fantastic. Appreciate it. I'm going to be counting on you for some feedback throughout this presentation. All right, so like she said, my name is Jonathan Miller. I'm a counselor. I work a lot with teenagers and kids and their families. And I was asked today to do a presentation on depression and some suicidal awareness. So those can be some pretty heavy topics sometimes. So I'm not going to go down a really dramatic road with this today. But what I would like to do is I want to make sure it's something that, like what I present today, I want it to be something that is really maybe presented in a way that's a little different than what you've heard before. Something that's really based in science, because if there's one thing I've learned working with teenagers is that you won't do anything unless you're convinced that it's scientifically based. So I think that's important. So we're going to go into some of that today. And as we're going, I definitely encourage if you have questions like, okay, that was really confusing. Can you say that again? Feel free to ask me to do that. But since you guys are all tech savvy, I thought one thing that might help a little bit today is as we go along, if there's some questions that you're thinking of, that maybe you don't want to raise your hand and ask, or maybe it's something that's a little bit more personal or something you really don't want to talk about out loud. Maybe it's something you've struggled with yourself or a friend. If you want to text that to me as I'm talking, if we have time at the end, I'll try to get to some of those texts and maybe we can come back to some of those questions and get a little bit more specific, a little more detailed, something that would help you. But that way you can do it anonymously. My only request is that you make them pretty brief, like a couple sentences, because if you shoot me like this big, long 3-text paragraph, I might not be able to get to it, all right? So if you can do that, that would be awesome. All right, so some questions that I want to try to answer today. First of all, what do we know about depression based on the latest biology and neuroscience? That's something I've been getting a lot of training in recently, is understanding what's actually happening in the brain when someone's depressed or anxious or dealing with the effects of past trauma. How can we use that knowledge to beat depression? How can I help a friend who's depressed? And what to do if a friend is suicidal? How can I help them? My goal is to try to answer those 4 questions, at least to a certain extent today. I'm not going to go into a lot of statistics today. I'm hoping that you guys have had a decent amount of exposure by the time you've reached this point in high school to some suicide awareness, things up in your school, in your community. If nothing else, you're probably aware that Alaska has the highest suicide rate in the nation across any other states. And I'm here today speaking with a group of kids who probably fit within the category of 15 to 19 years of age approximately. And that the suicide rate for that age graphic in our state is about 3 times what it is in the average in the nation. So, it's obviously something that really affects us here in Alaska, but really probably even more impactful than me just spouting off those statistics is the fact that probably most of you sitting here in this room have had some sort of a brush with suicide, either with your family or friends or in your community. It's just something that's all around us. So I know you guys get it probably better than some of the researchers who are off in their offices doing some of this research stuff. You guys are living where this stuff is happening. So I hope this is helpful today. First of all, talk a little bit about what is depression. So you guys are teenagers. You probably have experienced some things like mood swings, where you have a day that's really great and then you have a day that's kind of down. And some of that is pretty typical of just being a teenager, being an adolescent. But then there's, when it goes into more of where it becomes a real problem. You're having trouble functioning, you're having trouble getting up, you're having trouble keeping up with school, having trouble maintaining friendships, that kind of stuff. So I want to get in a little bit into knowing the difference between what is kind of teenage moodiness, what is actual depression. So starting with the science. So today I'm going to be talking a lot about 2 areas of the brain, 2 main areas, the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Have you seen that in science class? Awesome. All right, so that's the basic areas we're going to be dealing with today. So when we're talking about this, basically the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system. The limbic system is that area that's kind of deep down inside your brain. It's kind of like the further down in the depths of your brain you go, the more kind of primitive and in some ways simplistic your body reacts. It's more about survival. It's more about things that you can't really control as voluntarily. So the limbic system is responsible for things like sleep and hunger. So if you're tired, that's coming from your limbic system. Controls your sex drive. It gives you passion and motivation. It's part of the pleasure system in your brain. So if you're doing things that are pleasurable, you get that risk-reward balance. That's happening in the limbic system. And the big one we're focusing on today, that's where kind of the seat of all these emotions are coming from. And we're going to talk a lot about that. The prefrontal cortex, the blue area up there, now that is like the CEO of your brain. That's the part that's supposed to be taking care of the logic and the reason. It's supposed to be controlling the impulses that come from that limbic system. So if it's feeling really emotional, your prefrontal cortex is supposed to be able to step in and kind of rationalize that so you don't just go and do that really risky thing or just follow that impulse. When you're faced with uncertainty, it's supposed to kind of figure that out. It's also where abstract thought develops as you go through your teen years. It's where you think about plans for your future. And really interesting to me is that it also is the part of our brain that deals a lot with morality. And we'll get to that more later as well, but the fact that morality and the fact, the ability to make choices that are consistent with your beliefs or your morals or right and wrong, the fact that that's kind of centered in the prefrontal cortex, which has difficulty sometimes when the limbic system gets overstimulated, makes it really difficult times to make good decisions. So here's kind of where we get down to the nitty-gritty of it. When you were approximately 4 years old, if they would have hooked you up to some sort of an MRI or something that could read what was happening in your brain, that activity, and kind of how things were developed, this is kind of what it would look like. So to kind of break this down, what we're looking at here is the blue-purple. That's showing where there's more matter. There's actually more physical material in the brain. It has developed more. It's getting more involved in being used on a regular basis. The other areas, not so much. So if we could look at, so I get my mouse working here. So if you remember back that slide we were looking at, the middle of the brain is where that limbic system is. So if you're looking top down, you're looking right down into the limbic system right here. So you can see that even at 4 years of age, that emotional limbic part of your brain is starting to develop ahead of everything else. And if you look at it from the side view over here, you can see it's just starting to kind of develop down here as well, but that middle area of the brain is starting to develop at 4 years of age. Notice the prefrontal cortex area up here. What's happening up there? Almost nothing. That's why we don't expect 4-year-olds to have abstract reasoning and to make all these great choices and to think through things logically, because their brain literally hasn't developed that part of the brain yet. Make sense so far? All right, so let's take a look at a 13-year-old's brain. Get a little closer to your guys' age. Now you can see that middle area of the brain there we were just looking at, where the prefrontal cortex is, where the limbic system is, that is really turning blue. There's a lot of activity happening as you enter adolescence. That limbic part of your brain is really starting to develop and grow and become a lot more involved in things that you're doing in your daily life. However, notice the prefrontal cortex area. Not much happening there yet. 14 years of age. Oh, we got a little bit more blue, but man, that limbic system is continuing to develop and just explode with growth. 15 years of age. Okay, now we're starting to get a little bit of blue there up at the top near the prefrontal cortex. So that's hopeful for you 15-year-olds out there. Starting to expect a little more of you. 16, again, slowly developing, getting a little bit more consistent in blue there across the front, and especially you can see over here at the front of this one, getting quite a bit more blue. So by the time you hit 16 years of age, you're really starting to come into your ability to use your prefrontal cortex in a way that actually can help you make some more abstract, impactful decisions that are based on logic and reasoning. And then fortunately, by the time you're hitting 17, 18, 21, then your brain's getting pretty close to being mature, and you better have your act together, right? And not quite. We actually used to think that the brain was pretty much done developing by the time you were like 20, but they continue to monitor it, and really, your brain doesn't really reach full maturation until you're about 25. So what does this mean? Like, what does this actually play out to in real life? Well, I think you're probably figuring out so far that intense emotional feelings are just a normal part of having an adolescent brain. So when you are trying to look at situations you're faced with, maybe it's friendships, maybe it's just things that you're faced with. If you're, say, a 15-year-old, and you're trying to make a decision that bases reason and logic and rationality, that's going to be a lot harder for, say, a 15-year-old to do rather than a 19-year-old. Because that part of the brain literally isn't as developed yet. And the reason I'm trying to lay this foundation is because I feel like so many adolescents come into my office and they are a mess emotionally. They're doing risky behaviors, and they're really struggling, and their parents are like, I just need to take away more privileges, and I just need to make sure that they know the consequences of what's going to happen. And what I'm trying to help parents and kids realize is that in the heat of the moment, when you're faced with a decision, if you're in that mid-adolescent stage, there literally is some parts of your brain that aren't going to function as well as an adult. So you can look on and say, hey, this is what you should have done. Couldn't you see that? Why couldn't you have seen that? Couldn't you have seen the consequences that were down the path for you? And sometimes teenagers look back like, no, I was just kind of felt like the right thing to do. There was an interesting study that was done. This lady went to a school and asked a question of adults and teenagers. And the question was, if you were given the opportunity, would you swim with sharks? And right off the bat, the adults were like, no, of course not. Because immediately their logic and their reasoning was like right there. It's like, that would not be safe. But teenagers were like, swimming with sharks? That's interesting. Let's see. I would be really popular if I survived that and made it back to school and could tell people that I swam with sharks. And so they actually have a lot more like feelings involved in this. What would it feel like to do that? And so it's a lot more complicated process. Usually in the end, they got to the final decision like, yeah, probably not the best idea. But it took a while for them to get there. They had to wade through that limbic system and all those emotional responses that were coming up before they got to it actually like a good logical decision that probably swimming with sharks was not the best idea. So it's interesting to contrast that sometimes. So what is your limbic system up to? So I want to do a couple of things today to not just talk about this kind of hypothetically, but actually give you a chance to think about what's happening in your own body and in your own brain. So I'm going to try something today. This is called a mindfulness exercise. Mindfulness, people heard of that? All right, good. You're getting exposed to good stuff. So I want to do a little mindfulness exercise with you today. All right. So we're going to take about 60 seconds just to notice what we're feeling. All right, so if you will do this with me, I'll be very grateful to you. First, start by closing your eyes so you can shut out all the distractions around you. And now just notice any emotions that you're having. Are you feeling happy, angry, sad, anxious? So don't try to change that emotion or label it as good or bad necessarily. Just notice it if you can. So take about 10 seconds and just notice what emotions are happening for you right now. All right, next, notice your body. So start at the top of your head and just slowly scan down from your head to your toes, noticing your head and your chest and your arms, your shoulders, and just every section of your body. And just noticing any sensations. You feel warm, cold, kind of tight, or are you relaxed, feeling tired, whatever, just notice. All right, just take note of what you've noticed. You can open your eyes, so you can recall it as we go along, so we can kind of compare it to that. That'll be kind of like our baseline. Now that you've done that exercise, do we have any volleyball players here today? Guys or girls? All right, cool. Can I get 4 volunteers who wouldn't mind helping me out? All right, awesome. That is just, I'm just throwing it out there so you know that what I'm going to ask you to do resembles volleyball a little bit. So if you're okay with volleyball stuff, then you're probably going to be okay with this. But you don't need volleyball skills to do this. So I just need 4 volunteers. All right. All right. So let's do 1, and you get your hand up over here in the hat. 2, and then right here 3, and let's get at least 1 guy in here. Let's do this guy back here in the back. 4. All right. Grab that for me. All right, so originally I was actually planning on involving like everybody in this, but there's a few chandeliers in the room, and you guys all have drinks at your table, so we're just going to keep this up here, okay? So this is a totally nonsensical exercise, but I'll get to the point afterwards. So what I want you guys to do is to divide into 2 teams. So 2 of you over here, and 2 of you over here, all right? And I'm going to be your net, all right? I'm going to be your neck. And your goal is to get it back and forth across me for 2 full sets. So we'll go back and forth, and 1, back and forth, and 2. But when you do it, you have to do a set and then an over. Okay? So every time your team does a hit, it has to involve both of you. Does that make sense? See if you can do that and get it back and forth twice. You look confused. And then you get to hit it over. That way everybody's involved. Everybody's involved both times. It's all good. It's just a beach ball, so it's all right. It's all good. All right? Ready? All right, let's see if you guys do this 2 times back and forth. I'm going to do the net. All right, point for this side. All right. We're going for 1. Nice. All right, we're going to try for 1 completion. Let's see if we can do it. All right, go for it.
It's so light. Does that count?
All right, that is amazing. You even called it. You even said mine. I can tell you play for that one. That works. Thank you. Thank you. You guys can sit back down. All right, so those of you who volunteered to help me out there, I need a little feedback from you, okay? So we just did this mindfulness activity a second ago where like everybody was just sitting there, there's no expectations, you get to close your eyes. That might have caused a little bit of anxiety for you, I don't know. But basically you were just kind of there, doing this. But then I asked 4 of you to actually come up in front of everybody, all right, and do something. So can you contrast for me a little bit what it was like? So you just did this mindfulness exercise. You just sat there and noticed what you were feeling in your body. Then you came up here, and I'm curious if anything in your body changed. Anybody? What changed? Okay, so you were kind of relaxed, like, just here, and then you're like, okay, business time. Okay? What about for you? What did you notice as you like came up here and did this, contrasted to just sitting there and hanging out? Okay. All right. What about for you?
I was kind of excited to be in front of everybody.
Okay. What about that moment where it was like, okay, this is what I want you to do, and you're like, what? Like what? So what did you notice? That, like, did that cause any anxiety for you, or like a little bit? Okay. All right. Where's my other person? Well, I lost you. I had 3. Okay. Yeah. Well, so what about you? What did you notice? What's the difference between being there and being up here?
I was definitely like more awake, but alert.
Okay. Now what about when it wasn't going well? What about when it wasn't going well and it's like, okay, this is the expectation. You need to get 2 sets, and you guys were like hitting the ball like all over the place. Like at that point, like what happened? Like, what did you feel then? Frustration? Okay. Yeah. I thought I noticed, and I just happened to look at you, and when I was like, okay, we're going for 1 set, it's like I saw this focus change in your face from me, like, yeah, like this is fun, to like, okay, now we got to get down to business and actually make this happen. All right, so there was definitely a shift from just hanging out there to being up there. So I want you to think about what would have been happening in these guys' limbic system, like when that was happening. What was getting triggered? What was getting brought up? And keep that thought in mind as we get into this more. Because we're actually going to see what specifically was happening in the brain when they were doing that. So let me take a second and just kind of establish like what we're talking about when we mean depression. Like I mentioned earlier, the difference between kind of teenage mood swings and like flat out, like this is actual depression. So in counseling, we usually refer to that as major depression. Like if you actually go see a counselor, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm depressed, I need some help with this. We call it major depression. It's different than grief, first of all. Let me kind of contrast that. Like if you lose somebody, the feelings that you have can be similar sometimes to depression. You can feel really down, just really withdrawn from people. But usually with grief, if you have a good support system, people will help pull you through that. You give yourself a little bit of time, and that's just kind of normal to go through that grieving process. Whereas like depression is just like that down, discouraged, low energy feeling that just hangs around and just won't leave, and it just stays there, and it actually impacts your ability to live your life. So it might involve withdrawing from others. You can't seem to enjoy things that used to be fun. You have little energy. You have sleep issues, like you're not sleeping or you're sleeping way too much. You're feeling worthless. Maybe you have trouble concentrating on things like school. Maybe think about death. Don't have much hope for the future. You combine a few of those together, and you can see how that would really start to impact your ability to interact with life. But what makes depression worse than just a temporary feeling? What actually causes depression? Where does it come from? We're talking about the brain, so I mean that's really complex. But the simple answer is actually stress. Stress is what causes anxiety issues. It's what causes depressive issues. I'm not talking about the kind of stress like I've got a math test this week and it's causing me to feel a little bit of angst. And so this guy came and talked to us, and he said I shouldn't have stress, and so I'm gonna get rid of my algebra class. Like that's not the kind of stress I'm talking about. But actually, stress is actually good for you. To a certain degree. Like it's good to want to become something that's really difficult, like to become a doctor or something that's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of stress, and that can get you to good places. If you didn't have stress in your life, you'd probably just be really lazy. You wouldn't do a whole lot. But the kind of stress I'm talking about is the kind of stress that keeps going and going and going and just keeps assaulting your system. See, what's supposed to happen is stress is supposed to be that thing on the outside that comes into your limbic system and tells your limbic system, all right, we need some action here. So say, for example, you're in a situation, let's kind of use an extreme example. Let's say you're in a situation where you're actually in danger. Like someone's about to attack you, or something's about to fall on you. That is a stressful situation. It's a situation where your whole system goes into stress, and your limbic system secretes stress hormones like adrenaline, and like you kick into action. So some of you who did the volleyball experienced that just a little bit. There was just a little bit of stress there. There's a little bit of action expected of you, and so your limbic system upped your energy level, gave you a little bit of adrenaline that you needed to complete that. And then after that, now you're sitting back down. You're sitting back down. So now I'm assuming the energy level that came up temporarily is probably kind of back to where it was, right? Okay? What happens when you're dealing with depression or anxiety is that doesn't go back down like it's supposed to. It stays up there. So I don't know if any of you that did this exercise have ever struggled with anxiety, but imagine those feelings that you might have if you were the one who came up here and did that, kind of that pressure, that stress, a little bit of tightness in your chest, that upped energy level, and then it just doesn't go away. It's like there, like all the time, and like there's nothing stressing me, there's nothing here I should be worried about, yet I still feel that. Like that's a limbic system that has gotten overstressed and just stays in that stressful state all the time. And that type of stress also is what leads to depression. So a lot of times what happens is this sometimes actually starts in childhood. Children they're having, like we looked at the slides earlier, they're having that limbic system part of their brain starting to develop so they can recognize danger, so they can recognize things that are stressful. And if they're in an environment in their families or wherever that is supportive and that helps them feel safe and secure and teaches them how to deal with stress in a way that gives them some confidence, then they go into their teenage years and they hit this situation where their brain is really developing that limbic system, and all those emotions come even more intense, but they've learned that, hey, I can handle this. I've got a supportive family. I've learned how to deal with stress in a healthy way. I've seen my parents handle stress in a healthy way. Like if that's been the situation, then those teens tend to be a lot more well-adjusted sometimes. But kids who are raised in an environment where they don't have that, they don't feel safe, they don't learn how to manage stress well, they come into these teen years where not only is their brain physically already kind of prone to being overstimulated and overactive and over-emotional, but then they don't have the tools that they need to bring it back down afterwards and calm back down. Other things that can cause that, like along the way, is like if you go through something really traumatic, like that can really spike those stress responses in your brain to the point where you start to be hypersensitive to all kinds of stimuli around you, and your system isn't able to relax again. So when that happens over time, it's like your brain just gets overloaded, and this is what it starts to look like. So we're going to go into a little bit of more of the limbic system, 4 main areas. So on the outside there of the limbic system is a cingulate cortex. That's the part that's supposed to kind of communicate between your prefrontal cortex, up front there, your logic, and everything that happens instinctively in the midbrain. So when that's overstimulated, it's having trouble weeding things out and sorting out input, and it makes it really difficult to concentrate. It also is the part of your brain that is it's kind of introspective. It really notices your mistakes, and if you're going through a really down time, sometimes it's actually hard to think about positive things. It's hard to see the positive people around you that are there for you. But in actuality, even if things are positive, you can only see the negative. That's not just like a snap out of it, you shouldn't be thinking that way kind of thing. Like there's actually something happening in your brain, in your cingulate cortex, that it thinks it needs to focus on the negative more for survival. The hippocampus part of your midbrain, that's about memories. So if you're having trouble remembering pleasant things from the past, or it seems like you always focus on what happened negatively that week, again, that's actually something in your brain that is making that happen. The amygdala is the one I probably talk about the most. So it's like your brain's smoke detector. So when there's something that happens in your environment, it's the amygdala's job to make a snap decision. Is this something that is dangerous? Is this something I need to react to? And it kind of handles that fear and anxiety thing. So if you know someone or if you struggle with anxiety and you tend to be overly anxious about things that really don't deserve it, that's probably where it's coming from, is this amygdala. And the last thing over there is the hypothalamus. That's actually what secretes those stress hormones. And so if it gets overstimulated and it's oversensitive, it's sending out those adrenaline and all those other stress hormones to the rest of your body that's making it feel like it should be ready for action all the time, even though it's not. And that goes along with anxiety a lot. So I'm talking about anxiety, and the reason being is because even though this talk is focused more on depression, really it's dealing with the same area of the brain. What happens with depression a lot of times is that it's so overstressed that it's like it just eventually just has to kind of almost go numb or kind of try and take a more neutral approach and starts to kind of withdraw within yourself. And that ends up exhibiting more like depressive type symptoms. Whereas if you're still in that overstressed, overstimulated state, then it tends to be more like anxiety type symptoms. So now that you know kind of where like depression comes from, I want to get into like, okay, so what do you do about that? Like how do you calm down your limbic system? So some important things to know about that part of the brain is, first of all, it can't talk. So one of the first things we usually try to do is if we're feeling overstressed about something or we're feeling really depressed, we're seeing things really negatively, is we try to convince ourselves that we shouldn't think that way. Like that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense. Or like if someone's like panicking, like calm down, don't panic. And we try to tell ourselves that too. And we try to tell ourselves, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Stop doing that. Don't feel that way. And usually that's not very effective. Like think about what else we said at the beginning that part of the brain is responsible for. Hunger. Or being tired. So it's afternoon, right? You guys just ate lunch, now you're sitting. And now this guy's talking about the brain and all this scientific stuff. And so you're probably feeling tired. All right, so what are you trying to do about that? Are you like telling yourself, don't fall asleep. Don't do it. Wake up. Like, and how effective is that being? Like, is it helping? Or are you still kind of doing this every once in a while? You know, so it's like you can't talk to that part of your brain. So if you really wanted to wake up right now, you know what you could do? I'll show you. All right, everybody stand up. All right, everybody jump 3 times. Everybody reach your arms as high as you can like you're stretching. All right, and then reach out like this and make sure you hit at least one person. And then turn around once. Around, all the way around. And then do whatever you need to do. Do a little dance. And sit back down. All right, so what was more effective? Sitting there and telling yourself to wake up or doing that? All right, keep that in mind. So that's the key right there. Like if there's something you could leave with today, it's like that understanding of like, if I want to impact my limbic system, what's going on up there, I've got to do something with my body. All right, so that part of your brain, that limbic system inside, it doesn't listen to you talking, it doesn't listen to moral reasoning, honestly. It just reacts based upon the stimuli that it's getting. So here is what you just did. Here's what was happening. So the vagus nerve is this main nerve that runs down your spinal cord from that part of your brain, from the limbic system, mainly connected to that, and it goes to different parts of your body. Your stomach is the one that goes to the most, actually. And the vagus nerve actually is about 80% input to your brain and only 20% output. So that vagus nerve is constantly picking up messages from around your body. So if you're sitting there in your seat and you're like, something like this, like that is sending a message to your brain like, okay, this body is tired. This body's ready for a nap. All right, start shutting down things up here, guys. It is time for a nap. And that's what the limbic system is doing based upon the input that it's getting. Whereas when you stood up and you're like moving around, then it's like, okay, whoa, all these nerve impulses are shooting up to that part of the brain. It's like, well, okay, wait a second. We have responsibilities to take care of our people. We have got to keep our balance. We've got to not make a fool of ourselves while we're doing this. And we have got to make sure that we are taking care of, so it's getting energized again, right? And that's doing something with your body that's sending that message. So here's another experiment you can do with that, all right? So just turn your face to your table, and I want you to do a little imagination with me, okay? Let's pretend for just a minute that, that you are angry at that table, all right? Let's pretend that you are angry at that table. You were trying to move that table a second ago, and it landed on your toe, or you just hit your knee against it, all right? All right, so can you still hear me? Can you still hear me back there? A little bit? All right, I'll try to talk a little louder. All right, so let's pretend like you're angry at the table for whatever reason you can make up, okay? And now what I want you to do is I want you to make a fist like you're going to hit the table. Don't actually hit it. Okay, turn back toward me if you would. What did you notice in your body when you made that fist? If you need to, you can do it again. Like, what did you notice? Did you like take a breath? Did you like hold your breath? Did you make like a face? Did you grit your teeth? Like did anything else in your body tighten up, or was it just your fist? Yeah? What else did you notice? Anything else in your body? So what part of your brain was making all those secondary things potentially happen? Limbic system, right? So when you did that action, just making a fist, it's like your whole demeanor potentially. For me, it does. My whole demeanor changes. It's like I feel it's like I tighten my gut, like I'm ready for like a core action, like I'm going to hit something, and then it's almost like, I don't know, it's like this. I have to get into this feeling that goes along with it, like where it becomes justifiable for me to hit the table, because I can't just hit this poor innocent table if I'm not angry at it or something. So it's like I have to muster up this feeling against it that justifies what I'm about to do. So it's this whole complex. Oh, look there. All right, good. So it's like this whole complex system of things that comes together based on your limbic system and what you did with your fist. All right. Flipping back to the other side again. I want you to try this. Put your left hand on your stomach and your right hand on your heart. Yeah, this is not one of those like pat your head, rub your stomach exercises. All right. What I want you to do is breathe in, so that when you breathe in, your stomach goes out, your hand moves out. And then when you breathe out, it goes back in. So you're actually breathing with your abdominal muscles. Can you do that? So breathe out, and then push back in, okay? With your right hand on your heart. Got it? All right. So we're gonna do this together. So if you would, once again, close your eyes. And we're gonna breathe in for the count of 4, and then out for the count of 4. All right? So let's see if we can do it together. Ready? In, 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, out. 2, 3, 4. Keep doing that. In, 2. Try and let yourself just kind of focus on your breathing. Feeling the air going in and out. In for the count of 4. Out for the count of 4. All right, let's pause for a second and just notice again what is going on in your body. Do that scan again. From the top of your head, moving down. See what you notice. Some of you might notice that doing that breathing helped you feel more relaxed. It's a pretty common response. Maybe for some of you, it was actually hard to do that surrounded by people. Maybe it actually brought some anxiety to close your eyes. Maybe that wasn't comfortable for you. Maybe it didn't feel safe. But you were doing something that is actually one of the basic ways that we know of that you can impact your limbic system. The reason is because that vagus nerve that comes down, the place that we know that has the most nerve endings connected to that vagus nerve is actually your gut, your abdominal muscles. That's why we tend to feel things so intensely in our stomachs. If we're anxious, your stomach can potentially get upset or feel tight or just feel uncomfortable. And so one of the best ways that you can actually talk to that limbic system, not from your prefrontal cortex by telling it things, but by actually using something like your abdominal muscles to send messages to it. So why would breathing, not necessarily slowly, although that's important too, but breathing evenly and regularly, why do you think that would send a calming message to the brain? Any ideas? Yeah, that's a good thought. It actually does. It actually is very similar to sleep. And usually if you're sleeping, your body is very relaxed. Yep. Any other ideas?
Like the rapidness and speed of how you breathe. I mean, like if you're breathing really fast, like you're kind of like anxious, something like
Right.
being like calm and relaxed, your body never lets go.
So she was talking about the actual, like contrasting it with breathing fast. So if you're anxious or if you're in danger, your breathing is not regular and even and slow. In fact, like out in nature, one of the first things that happens, if like let's say a predator is going to be trying to take out some prey, one of the first things it usually tries to do is knock the air out of that thing. So if your breathing is off, or if you can't breathe, or someone's on top of you and you're restless, you can't get your breath, it's like instantly that sends all kinds of really negative, scary messages to your body that you are in danger. So the complete opposite of that is having controlled, regular breathing. And the reason you do it from your abdominal muscles, with your abdominal muscles, again, because that's where a lot of those nerve endings are. It's not quite as effective if you do it from like your chest, or if you're breathing with your shoulders, like this. But specifically doing it from your stomach. And that's been something that we kind of instinctively knew as the human race, I think. Like people say, okay, take some deep breaths, calm down. So we knew it kind of helped, but now we know like how to use it even a little more effectively and making sure it's not just the deep breaths. Like what you don't want to do is take a deep breath and hold it. Like that actually can cause more anxiety. But just that even breathing can be something that you can use. And it sends a message from your gut to your brain in a way that's really powerful. So that's one way that you can impact your limbic system. That's something you can do in the moment, right now. Takes 1 minute, easy to do. But probably the most effective thing we know of, like a little more involved thing that we know of for calming the limbic system, is actually controlled movement. And specifically, the best way we know to do that is yoga, like yoga-based controlled movements. Does anybody in here have experience doing yoga? All right, so I'm not talking about like the kind of yoga like where you're trying to use it to lose weight, and get in shape or any of that kind of stuff, but really the kind of yoga, where it's slow and it's controlled and you're breathing, you're noticing your breathing. That does a couple things for your body. First of all, in the moment, it's very calming because you're very much in control, your movements are slow, you're aware of your breathing, but at the same time, it also gives your body the sense of being able to be in control. Some people who are really struggling with depression or anxiety, they have a hard time even feeling their bodies, or especially if you've been through trauma. Maybe you've been abused or molested. It may be scary to even let yourself feel what's in your body. So if you're able to do yoga and notice what you're feeling and go with the slow movements, it's very calming to your limbic system, not only in the moment, but letting your system know that you're able to do that. And so doing a regular practice, something like that, can really help out. The other side of that, I think it's really important. And this we did a little bit today, and I'd be really curious to sit down with each one of you if you had the chance to find out what it was like for you even to notice your body. Because I have a lot of kids who come to my office, and for them, it's really uncomfortable to even notice their bodies. Like to sit there and like notice, okay, what am I feeling? Like they don't like to do that. A lot of times, a lot of them just kind of feel numb. They kind of feel nothing because they're so used to being disconnected from their bodies because those feelings that they've had have been overwhelming and scary for them. So one of the skills is being able to even let yourself feel those feelings. And one of the reasons I like to go into the science of this is because I want you to understand where those feelings are coming from. That these aren't feelings that mean something as far as that they're bad. Like if you feel anxious, that something's wrong with you, like you should be able to control it. Or even if you feel panicky. Have you ever had situations where you felt panicky but there was nothing to be panicked about? Like maybe you're walking outside from your house to your barn or something in the dark and you know there's nothing there, but yet there's just the environment kind of makes you feel panicky. Stuff like that. You have a question over here? Or you're just agreeing? All right, cool. So when you're thinking about feelings, we tend to categorize feelings as like bad or good. So, and unfortunately, there's a lot of feelings that fit in the bad category. Anxiety, sadness, fear, anger even. What's left for the good side? Well, happiness, excitement. And we tend to think if we're feeling these feelings over here that we need to change them, or that we don't want to feel them, or we need to try to avoid them. But one of the things I try to challenge people to think about is to get out of that black and white feeling of these things are bad, these feelings are good, and to realize that really these are being caused by brain chemicals in your brain. Like that hypothalamus, it's secreting chemicals that are related to those kinds of things. That's your limbic system that's doing its thing up there. And you can actually take a step back and just observe what's happening without having to react to it and like, oh no, I don't want to feel that way. Like change that feeling and just let it be what it is for a little bit, because really it's just like, oh, I noticed I have this like little pain in my arm. I don't know what that's all about. Oh, I feel this tightness in my chest. Kind of feels like anxiety. It's interesting. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know what that's about. Rather than like, oh no. Because a lot of times what ends up happening is you actually make it worse and more intense, because it's like you start to feel anxiety, and that makes you feel anxious and panicky. Then you start to panic about the panic, and then it's like you get into this cycle of being anxious about anxiety. And that's how people usually end up having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. It's actually their fear of the next attack ends up a lot of times being more anxiety-provoking than anything that's going on around them. So you can get trapped into those cycles. And so being able to take a step back and just like, and notice that's a really key skill to be able to do. So using your body to calm your limbic system, some things you can do. First thing we talked about, basic thing, really easy, breathing exercises. One of the foundational things I always tell people to do in the moment. And those yoga-based movements, highly recommend it. If you haven't done much yoga and you tend to have some depression or anxiety, I really recommend checking that out. Dancing. Yeah. How could dancing potentially help the limbic system? What do you think? Ideas? What do you think?
So it's like the moving around thing, makes like all your nerves light up.
Yeah. And I'm not talking about the kind of dancing that's like competitive dancing, where you're up on a stage, and I'm talking about the kind of dancing where it's like you are enjoying this and you are like free flowing or whatever you do when you dance, It's like you're able to enjoy it. And it's involving your body. Physical exercise. We've known this for quite a while with depression. It's like if you actually get out and do some exercise, releases dopamine, but just those physical controlled movements again can help with mindful activities. So that's being in the moment, right here, and letting it be what it is. So if you feel a little bit of something in your chest, a little bit of tightness, if you feel kind of no energy, and just noticing that. But a lot of times when we get into those negative states of mind, our mind is like a million miles away, and we're having all these imagined fears, and we're having all these thoughts about how people see us and how we must appear to people and what they must be thinking about us, and we're just up in our heads and we're off somewhere in space. But if you can bring yourself back into the present, where you are right here, and you can feel your butt sitting in your chair, and you can feel how warm or cold it is in here, and you can notice your hands laying on your legs. Like if you're actually mindful of what's happening in the present, then you're probably not going to be as anxious or depressed about all those other things. This one's kind of fun. Sometimes I have kids do this in my office. Like before I even tell them what I'm doing, I'll have them, okay, if you were feeling really timid and anxious and kind of scared, what would that look like if you were sitting there? So try it once. If you're feeling really timid and anxious and scared and just wanted to like shrink into a hole and have nobody see you, what would that look like if you were sitting with that posture? All right? How does it feel to sit that way? Is that pleasant? Is that enjoyable? No? All right. Now try that. Let's say that you were like the most popular person in this room. Like everybody wants to be your friend, and you're just chilling and hanging out. You're like, what is up with you? It's like you are totally relaxed. All right? Yeah. How does that feel? Does it feel different than sitting like this? Does it create any kind of a different sensation in your body? Being aware of what you're doing posture-wise can actually be impactful. Because people who have gone through a lot of trauma or tend to be very anxious, depressed, they tend to get more and more into a depressed posture. Not literally walking around like this, but it's like their heads are down, or they're slumping, or when they sit, they're kind of like withdrawing. And if you're aware of that kind of stuff and you actually help your body open up more and do posture that's more consistent with a positive, confident approach, again, you're sending messages to your limbic system like, oh, okay, wait a second. You don't need to be feeling anxious here. Apparently this body down here is very confident and open and actually changes some of the chemicals that are being reflected from your limbic system. Simply going for a walk. There's actually a lot of comfort that can be had in a back and forth movement for your body. What's one of the first things we do for a baby when they're crying? Yeah, you pick them up and you kind of rock on them, or you pat them on the back. That back and forth stimulation is very calming to your body. So just going for like a slow paced walk, kind of having the back and forth movement can be very calming to your system. Physical touch. That can actually be very exciting, of course, but I'm talking about the kind of physical touch that's like nurturing, it's calming, giving someone a hug can sometimes do more than, 10 minutes of trying to comfort them. That actually can be very, as long as you have that kind of relationship with that person where it helps them feel more secure, helps them feel more supported, more, connection with you. That's a really powerful way because, again, it's involving the body, and that's sending a strong message to your limbic system that you're safe, you're secure, you're being supported. All right. So those are some specific things you can do to help your limbic system. Another thing to keep in mind is just basic stuff. I mean, this hopefully is somewhat common sense, but basic hygiene and healthy habits. If you're not doing those things, if you're going through a depressed state or you have a friend who is, make sure you get enough sleep, eating, taking care of your body by showering, treating your body with respect, getting fresh air, working your muscles, and making sure you're staying away from drugs and alcohol. That's not the direction that my topic is on today, but if I went to the science of that, I would be talking about the limbic system. That's where drugs and alcohol really have their effect, is in that pleasure circuit of the limbic system. And so if you're already struggling with depression or anxiety and you're trying to use alcohol or drugs to kind of help deal with that, you're just throwing more unpredictability and adding a whole another layer of complexity to what's going on in your limbic system and actually making the problem a whole lot more complex and harder to beat in the long run. So definitely something to be aware of and stay away from if you're struggling with those things. One kid I was working with said that her days tended to go better when she was really depressed if she just made sure she at least got out of bed, showered, brushed her teeth, and ate something. Like that's the foundation for doing, just then you can do these other things. The other aspect that we mentioned just a little bit, like when we were talking about hugs, is that social connections are really, really important, especially for teenagers. That part of your brain, that limbic system, is really big on that reciprocity of social connections and emotional connections. And so when you're a teenager, that part of your brain is really focusing on what it feels like to be connected to somebody else. Even that ability to see things from someone else's perspective. Did you know you didn't have that a few years ago? That ability to okay, if they were in my shoes, how would they see this? Or how are they seeing me? That's a relatively new skill as you hit adolescence. And for a while, it kind of takes over. Have you ever noticed that when you enter a room, you feel kind of self-conscious maybe, or you feel like people are looking at you? That starts to go away as you become an adult. And it's not nearly as intense as it is for most teenagers. Most teenagers tend to get that ability to see things from other people's perspectives, and they do that all the time, it seems like. They're always thinking about what is someone else thinking. They're getting ready for school in the morning, and they're like, oh, someone's going to notice that I have this zit on the side of my head. Or they're going to notice that these clothes don't match, or that I didn't get a chance to iron my jeans this morning. In actuality, 9 out of 10 people aren't going to notice any of that. But it feels like everybody is. And you walk down the hallway, and it feels like everybody's staring at you, because you didn't iron your jeans that morning, or whatever silly situation you come up with. But that's just part of that social connectedness. And so, for one thing, it can add a lot of extra stuff into the mix of depression and anxiety. But the part I want to focus on more is, because those social connections are so important, that means that you can have a pretty big impact on people around you. So I need 7 volunteers this time. And let me tell you what you're doing first, so you don't get yourself in over your head, right? All right, so I have 7 slips of paper here with very short things that I'd like for you to stand up and read very loudly. So criteria for this, you got to be okay with reading. Second of all, you got to be able to at least say it loud enough that I can reach across the room. And then I'm going to ask a couple follow-up questions later. So if you're okay with that, I need you. All right, 7 of you. All right, awesome. So someone who hasn't got a chance to volunteer yet, all right? So no repeats. So back in the back, all right? It's 1, 2, 3. Let's do 2 more from here. 4, 5, 4, 5. And let's get 2 from back here. I got to talk to the guy in the green shirt, so let's do 6 and 7 right in front of him. All right, so blue shirt guy and white hat. Come on up here and just grab one of the slips of paper. slip of paper right here. Grab one, and you may go back to your seat.
Okay.
Fantastic. All right, so these are some things that I have picked up from the teenagers that I've been working with. In fact, it's pretty cool. I spent a lot of time with actually one of my adolescent girls. She's 17 now. I've been working with her for a while, and she's had a long history of depression. She had a couple of suicide attempts, and has really struggled with this stuff. But has really come a long ways and is doing amazing. And so I sat down with her one day. I was like, you know what? I had this chance to go talk to some kids about this kind of stuff. Like, what are some things that you would tell them if you had the opportunity to? So these are some things that I pulled from her and from my talks with a couple other kids. So I figured it would be more appropriate to hear them from a kid's voice instead of mine. All right? So number one, if you could stand up and read that out loudly for us. Oh, wait a second. And this is the ways you can help friends who are depressed or suicidal. Go.
Help them feel they matter to you, offer their friendship, like know you are there.
All right, cool. So just make sure everybody heard, okay? Help them feel like they matter to you, offer them your friendship, and let them know you are there for them to talk to. That was one of the key things I was hearing. All right, number two.
Be accepting of their feelings. Help them know it's okay to feel this way. Or that way.
Or this way. That works. All right. So the key with that one is if someone starts to talk to you about how they're feeling, you act really uncomfortable, then they're probably not going to feel comfortable talking to you about it. But if you keep in mind some of the stuff we talked about today, like, hey, just what's happening in your brain. Like, it's normal to feel that way. It's okay. If you make them feel like it's okay, then they'll feel okay to talk to you. Number three.
Consider giving them a hug or putting your arm around their shoulder while they're talking.
All right. So that goes back to that nurturing physical touch. Number four.
But I get them involved in something that on their
All right, so you guys are here because you're leaders in your communities, right? So this isn't knowledge that most people are aware of. Most people couldn't stand up and talk to you about their limbic system or have a clue what's happening. Now you do. Right? You're taking this knowledge back, hopefully, to your communities, to your schools, and you're going to have some insight into what's happening when people are anxious or stressed or depressed or suicidal that goes beyond probably what they know, okay? So maybe you'll have an opportunity to help use this stuff to help a friend. And maybe something you could do with them, like you read there, that would help calm their limbic system. Number five.
Help them get involved in something social that can give them a sense of purpose and belonging.
All right, cool. Number six.
If they are suicidal, don't be afraid to tell someone who can help.
Number seven.
If you're worried about their safety, don't leave them alone.
All right, cool. So here's a few other things I was told by teenagers. Trust your gut. If it seems like something's off, talk to your friend about it. It's better to just ask. This may be the biggest one that I hear about that I think is important to know. It is okay to ask a friend if they're feeling suicidal or thinking about hurting themselves. I think that's really important to be aware of. Often people who are having those thoughts would have a hard time saying that out loud because they're afraid of how they're going to be seen or judged. So sometimes if you help break the ice, it makes it okay for them to talk about it in a situation where maybe they wouldn't feel like it's okay. If you're concerned that a friend might be suicidal, tell an adult who can help. Even if you think your friend might be upset that you told, they might be upset. They probably will be upset, actually, because what part of their brain are they using right then, probably? Their limbic system, right? But when they get back to being a little more healthy and are thinking logically again, they'll thank you for it. But going back to that, sometimes people are hesitant to bring up suicide because they think, well, if I mention the word, then maybe that will make them more suicidal, or fears like that. But in actuality, there's a couple of things to think about. First of all, people don't really want to die. They just want to escape their pain and suffering. So first of all, you're not going to put the idea of suicide in someone's mind, because unless they don't have a brain, they've already thought of suicide. I would be surprised if the majority of you in this room haven't had a suicidal thought at some point, because you're intelligent human beings and you're aware of the fact that if you died, your body would no longer feel things, And it's like it's just a part of having an intelligent brain. A thought of suicide comes into our minds occasionally. It doesn't mean we want to do it. It doesn't mean we plan to do it. But it's relatively normal to have a thought like that pop in your head sometime. It's part of having a brain. And so taking away some of that fear of even talking about suicide with other people can really help open up those conversations and make it okay for people. Because people don't really want to die. They want to escape their pain and suffering. And so if you give them a chance to talk about it a little bit, maybe that would be enough to give them the hope that they don't go through with it. Excuse me. Suicide is usually just the last option when there appears to be no other way out, no hope for the future. So when someone is purely stuck, it's like there's no way out of this. So just having someone come alongside them, sit beside them, let them know you care about them, sometimes they'll take that as like their little glimmer of hope and they'll put off suicide for a couple of days. Or just that it puts something else in their field of vision. So I'm going to pass out here at the end something that kind of goes along with this. What do you do if a friend is suicidal now? So if they have if they're talking about an immediate plan of what they want to do, or they have access to a gun or something that they could hurt themselves with, then first of all you take it seriously and don't leave them alone. Get help immediately. And some of those principles are on these Careline cards. I've got a whole stack of them, enough for everybody to have one. They can fit in your purse or your wallet or whatever. They've got the Careline number on the front. And they've got some warning signs and stuff on the back. So I'll pass those out to you. But first, how many of you are familiar with the Careline? Heard that? All right, sweet. Some of you may not be. This is a picture of their homepage. So Careline is kind of an Alaska thing, but it's basically like a suicide hotline. And that's kind of how it was originally billed. It kind of started hey, if you're suicidal, call us. But then they began to realize sometimes people didn't call because they were afraid, oh, my issue isn't important enough. So they actually made it Alaska's suicide prevention and someone to talk to line. And they have an app. So here's what they say on their website. Contact us if you're in a crisis, if you're a survivor, if you're grieving, if you're concerned about someone. So there you go. If you have a friend you're concerned about, you don't know if they can be safe, just call these. They say call us, and we'll walk you through it. We'll help you know what to do. Or if you're just feeling down yourself, you need someone to talk to, you can call them. They have a 24/7 number that you can call, that 1-877, or on Tuesdays through Saturdays from 3 to 11 p.m., you can actually text them. So if you text for help to that number, you can actually talk to someone via text. All right. So we are really close to being out of time. So let me see here. Finish it up. I'm going to get to some of these questions if I can. All right. So this is something I hope you guys think about when you guys go back to your schools and communities. First of all, I would really challenge you to find out what kind of suicide awareness or prevention program is in place at your school. Make sure you know that they have one and that it's being used. Secondly, what kind of resources are available for youth in your community that are struggling with depression or suicidal thoughts? There may not be any, or may not be much of any. Based on what you've learned, maybe there's some things that you could do with some of your friends that would get them moving, get them active, get them involved in something, do something that brings some purpose to your group of friends based on what you learned today. So hopefully some things you can answer. All right, let me pull up my phone here for a couple minutes. All right, so some signs of suicidal behavior. There's going to be some on the back of this card, okay? So make sure you note those. I was going to say them verbally here today, but we are out of time. But those are things that are really readily available on the website, on this. There's a lot of resources out there, and please make sure you familiarize yourselves with those so you know what to look for. All right, someone asked, are we born depressed, or does it develop from our different experiences? It definitely can develop from different experiences, especially when we're talking about the childhood environment that you're brought up with. If you go through something really traumatic, and I leave that wide open, I don't define that. If it was traumatic to you, that can definitely be something that you go through that can end up with some depression, anxiety stuff you might need help getting through. But the question, are we born depressed? There are some genetic predispositions to depression, if you know what I mean by that. It means that you may have been born with a genetic makeup that makes you more likely to be anxious or depressed if you're put into a situation where that is going to kind of be triggered. So it doesn't necessarily mean you come out of your mom, already depressed. You're just this really melancholy kid, but it does mean that you might be more susceptible to it as you go. Good question. Another question was, what about if you can't eat? Like you throw up everything you eat. And that's something that, like, if it's gotten to that point, then I would recommend definitely making sure you talk to somebody who, like a counselor or somebody who can help you sort out like what's going on with that. Like, are we talking about something that could be physical? Like sometimes people come to me for mental and emotional things, and it turns out there's actually a physical cause for it. And they have something they can go to a doctor for and it can get taken care of. If it's something that's caused by like anxiety, or like if you are into like binging and purging, like where you're making yourself throw up and then you're eating a lot and making yourself throw up, that kind of stuff. Those kinds of things, usually, there's counselors that are really trained in that can help you figure out ways to deal with that and overcome that. But if it gets to that point, then I think it's something that definitely you need to explore with someone who has some training in that. This is awesome. I'm going to read this later to myself, but someone's comments about the swimming with the sharks idea. All right, is depression genetic? Hopefully we answered that one. Someone spell checking my I misspelled adolescent. And someone noticing their emotions, that's amazing. You didn't pick me, that made me sad. And you recognize that. That's amazing. You're already using what you learned here today. All right, last one. How long does it take for someone to get out of depression? Or how often do people fall back into depression? Awesome question. It's kind of like a scale of 1 to 10 kind of thing. Like, how depressed are you? Is it something that's come about in a relatively short period of time? Or something that's been going on for a long time? If it's something that you have been struggling with for 5 years, and you developed a lot of bad habits around acting depressed and ingraining in your limbic system that you are a depressed person, then sometimes it takes a lot to get out of those habits and build new habits. Whereas if it's something that came on relatively recently, like over the summer, your friends moved away, and some other things happened, and you end up being depressed, and it's been like 3 months, there's a good chance that you'll be able to come back to that pretty quickly. And it so much depends on the person. I've had people come to my office, and within a couple of sessions, it's kind of a short-term thing they were facing. They were in this really negative mindset, doing things that are really unhealthy for their bodies. And when they learned some of this material and actually did it, after a couple of sessions, like they were noticing a major change just because of the changes that they had made. But then there's people that come to my office who have been traumatized throughout their childhoods. I mean, trauma after trauma by this person and that person, and this thing happened, and now they're teenagers, and they've been living these traumatic situations all their life. And it's affected how they see themselves as a person, and it's really deeply affected them. Like those types of cases, sometimes I'll work with those clients for a couple of years, getting them straight and back on a course that's really healthy and seeing themselves in a healthy way, because then it's almost like reshaping the way that you were kind of raised, if that makes sense. So it really varies. All right, guys, I am out of time for today. Last thing I wanted to notice, or to tell you, is that our goal in videoing this today is we're actually going to post today's video on YouTube with the adolescent misspelling corrected. And in a few days, if you go to YouTube and you search for Teen Depression Fairbanks, I think with or without the hashtag, but all together like that, today's session will be up on YouTube. So if you're like, man, you talk about a lot of stuff, I'm never going to remember all that. You can refer back to it if you want to use it for your community. I'm going to have these slides posted up there so you can get back to some of those things, remind yourself, or share them with somebody else. And if it ain't nothing else, it'll be a resource for you to refer back to, that hopefully as you go back to your communities, to your schools, and then being the leaders that you are, this can be something you can have in your back pocket. Thank you guys. Love being here today. Appreciate it.